What made this man so angry that he'd beat the stainless steel box out of shape? Because fate always plays such cruel jokes on Walter that he finds it hard to accept this reality. Today, Walter, who was just diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer, had a follow-up at the hospital, and he accidentally found that the film showed a large white area in the lung. Because the specific results would take a week to come out, he felt that his days were numbered. Since Saul had once pitched his services to him, Walter was eager to have him launder the money. However, this time Walter only took out $16,000, and Saul was surprised. He knew Walter's business was very profitable, so why was he laundering so little money? Because there had been some issues with the business recently, Walter said he would focus on producing contraband as soon as possible. Saul was of the same mind, since he would get a 17% commission. After a quick calculation by Saul, less than $10,000 was left after the $16,000 was laundered. But Walter had no complaints because it was his only option now. Back at home, Walter suddenly said he wanted to visit his mother. Skyler thought Walter felt his scan results were bad and wanted to see his mother one last time. She urged Walter to be optimistic, but Walter knew that optimism wouldn't change the harsh reality. And to get Skyler to agree to his request smoothly, Walter promised to try to secure some of the estate for her. Seeing Walter so determined, Skyler no longer pressed against his request. Meanwhile, Jesse and Jane, who had just fallen in love, were planning a spontaneous trip. At that moment, Walter suddenly called Jesse and told him that the next few days would be dedicated to producing contraband. Actually, Walter didn't really want to visit his mother, but wanted to make as much money as possible in his last few weeks. But Jesse said he wasn't available today. Seeing Jesse so determined not to work, Walter had to find an excuse he didn't understand.
Our methylamine, it's going bad. What? It's losing its chemical potency now. Unless stealing another barrel sounds good to you. Hell no. Right, we have to act fast before. Have a paper and pencil? Come on.
All right.
Lack of culture is really scary. Poor Jane stood up on her first date. The next day, Skyler took Walter to the airport, and as soon as she left, Walter came out from inside. Soon, Jesse drove the RV to the airport to pick up Walter, and then their bizarre journey began. The two drove the RV to the wilderness where Jesse's phone lost signal. He wanted to borrow Walter's phone to call Jane but was ruthlessly rejected by Walter, fearing his wife would investigate his calls again. Seeing Jesse only brought a bucket of water for living, Walter felt it might not be enough. It seems they couldn't bathe for the next few days. Then the two started to put on protective suits to work. Just then, Jesse picked up the car keys that fell on the ground and casually threw them on a nearby workbench. This made the meticulous Walter instantly annoyed. He warned Jesse to put the keys somewhere they wouldn't be lost, because this was the only key to their RV, and losing it in the wilderness could have serious consequences. Jesse, annoyed, put the keys in the ignition, so they wouldn't have to worry about finding them when driving, but he didn't know this was his first fatal mistake. With the gasoline generator started, Walter and Jesse officially began working, and after several training sessions, Jesse had become a competent assistant to Walter to keep the machine running 24 hours a day. The two took turns on duty at night. After several days and nights of hard work, they produced over 40 pounds of contraband. After some rough calculations by Walter, they were each entitled to $67,216.39. Hearing this, Jesse was so happy he almost jumped up. Just then, the RV suddenly lost power. Because they had already completed their task beyond expectations, Jesse wanted to take this opportunity to rest. However, the ambitious Walter wanted to continue. He aimed to use up all the remaining methylamine in the barrel.
There's gotta be a Denny's out there someplace. Grand Slam, hot shower, a bed.
But he was eventually persuaded by the exhausted Jesse. Just as the two were about to leave, the RV suddenly wouldn't start because Jesse had left the keys in the ignition, which drained the starter battery. The two blamed each other, but what was the use? The rational Walter calmed down and decided to find a way to recharge the RV's battery. Since the gasoline generator was out of fuel, Walter had no choice but to siphon some from the RV's fuel tank, accidentally swallowing a mouthful. Jesse, holding the fuel hose, also spilled gasoline on the generator's body. Then the two carried the generator to the front of the RV and connected the positive and negative terminals properly. Now it was Jesse's turn to perform. Because the generator was covered in gasoline, Jesse couldn't start it no matter how hard he pulled. Walter directly provoked Jesse by saying his strength was like that of a woman. To prove he was a real man, Jesse pulled with all his might, only for the generator to suddenly burst into flames. Seeing it about to explode, Walter hurried into the RV to find something to put out the fire, but Jesse reacted faster, grabbing the last bit of drinking water by the door and pouring it directly on the fire. Seeing this, Walter, holding a fire extinguisher, had countless swear words running through his mind. I'm not afraid of godlike opponents, but afraid of pig-like teammates.
Jesse is always just gone.
With no other options, Jesse stood on the roof looking for a cell signal but couldn't find any, so he had to come down and ask Walter for the only phone with a bar of signal. Given how dire the situation had become, Walter no longer considered the possibility that his wife might check the phone. Jesse picked up the phone and called Badger for help, telling him their rough location from his vague memory of driving and asking Badger to bring some drinking water and set off immediately. Due to the large temperature difference in the suburbs, the two shivered from the cold at night. Seeing Badger hadn't arrived yet, Jesse asked to use Walter's phone again to check Badger's location. Based on Badger's description of his surroundings, the two men confirmed that he'd gone the wrong way. Before Jesse could correct Badger's route, the only usable phone ran out of battery. By this point, Walter was too weak to blame Jesse, and he just silently turned his head to sleep. The next morning, Walter decided to treat a dead horse as a live horse doctor and began manually generating electricity using the burnt-out gasoline engine. After taking turns for most of the day, Walter, who was suffering from cancer, was the first to be physically defeated. Seeing his condition, Jesse thought he was about to collapse. Then Walter coughed so hard he almost passed out. It was at this moment Jesse realized Walter had deceived him. The methylamine wouldn't spoil. It was Walter's impending death that made him so eager to produce contraband. Walter didn't explain, just lowered his head and continued manually generating electricity. Both were so exhausted, they decided to try starting the RV. Hard work pays off, and Jesse successfully started the RV, but before he could even celebrate for a few seconds, the car automatically shut off again, a huge reversal that almost drove Jesse to despair. At that moment, Jesse suddenly realized Walter was gone. When he comes to the far side, he finds Walter coughing up blood, and it seems that Walter's life has almost come to an end. Walter felt this was retribution for his involvement in producing contraband, but Jesse still tried to console him, saying he did it all for his family. But the dying Walter seemed unable to forgive himself for deceiving his family. At this point, Jesse couldn't care less. He had a new girlfriend waiting for him, so he decided to walk out on foot, but he was stopped by Walter's scientific reasoning because their electrolytes were almost in disarray, and they could very likely faint within an hour of walking out. Hearing this, Jesse became anxious, urging Walter to use his intelligence to think of another way. They couldn't just sit there and wait to die.
Take some of these chemicals and mix up some rocket fuel. That way you can just send up a signal flare. Or you make some kind of robot to get us help, or a homing device, or build a new battery, or wait, no. What if we just take some stuff off of the RV and build it into something completely different? You know, like
Jesse's offhand remark about making a battery instantly sparked an idea in Walter. Walter immediately got up and asked Jesse to collect all the galvanized metal parts. He was going to make the most primitive battery. Next, Walter went back to his chemistry teacher mode, explaining the principles of batteries to Jesse. After their efforts, they made 6 small batteries into a primitive battery pack with all the collected materials. Then Walter connected the positive and negative terminals of the power source, and it was time to witness the miracle. This time it was Walter who started the car. He pressed the accelerator pedal a few times. After 2 attempts, they finally got the RV started. Jesse didn't show the extreme excitement he did the first time. Back at the airport, Jesse promised Walter that even if he died, he would ensure Walter's share of the money was given to his family. At this moment, the two were like saying their final goodbyes, both feeling immensely melancholic. The scene shifts to Walter, waiting with his family for Dr. Del Cavalli's verdict, but to Walter's complete surprise, his symptoms had receded, and the cancerous tissue had reduced by 80%. The Walter family was as thrilled as if they had won the lottery. Dr. Del Cavalli brought out the X-rays of Walter's chest. The whitish patch at his lung was a side effect of his radiation therapy, but this usually isn't severe. It was also the cause of Walter's persistent cough. Dr. Del Cavalli then planned to treat this symptom and reassured Walter's family not to worry. At present, the possibility of recovery still seemed very promising. Though this was fantastic news, Walter felt as if fate was mocking him, leading to the scene at the beginning where he furiously beat the stainless steel box. If he had known his life was not at stake, why would he have taken such risks? Do you think Walter will continue down this path? This is the episode in Breaking Bad where Walter undergoes a major turning point. The once obliging chemistry teacher begins to assert his sovereignty. It was from this episode onwards that Walter, who once reluctantly ventured into danger for his family, now willingly embarked on the irreversible path of becoming Heisenberg. As Walter becomes more corrupted, and due to the disharmony in their marital relationship, Skyler also starts on the path of infidelity, but Walter remains completely oblivious. After Dr. Del Cavalli announces Walter's improved condition, Walter feels both joy and sorrow due to the tricks fate has played on him. After a bout of venting, Walter eventually calms down. After his wife goes to work, he can't wait to meet Jesse and tell him the good news about his condition. After hearing this, Jesse is very happy because it means they can continue to collaborate and make more money. But Walter indicates that he plans to stop after selling the latest batch of product. Although Jesse is a bit disappointed, he respects Walter's decision. To celebrate Walter's improved health condition, Skyler specially organizes a family party for him. Everyone at the party is happy, but the protagonist Walter seems to have a lot on his mind. Just as Walter is feeling frustrated by fate's mockery, he overhears Hank bragging to his son next to him, and Hank's talking about the time he went to the border to support a head bomb. Walter Jr. looks up to Hank with admiration. In his eyes, Hank is a true hero, but what he doesn't know is that Hank was completely terrified at the time, and after coming back, he hid at home, too scared to see a psychologist because of his status as a police officer. Thanks to Walter's advice, Hank managed to come out of his fear. Walter hopes his son sees these truths. He should admire his own dad. To change his son's perspective, Walter's next move baffles Hank. He tops up Hank's in his own glasses and then deliberately pours alcohol for his underage son. At first, Hank doesn't notice anything unusual. Walter encourages his son to drink freely, and Walter Jr., drinking hard liquor for the first time, accidentally chokes. Hank comes over to comfort his nephew who doesn't know how to drink, then starts bragging about his heroic deeds again. Walter dislikes his son's admiration for Hank and fills up the 3 glasses again. Seeing Walter pour more alcohol into Walter Jr.'s glass, Hank gets a bit upset.
Whoa, what you doing there? What does it look like I'm doing? Kid's 16. You going for Father of the Year? We're celebrating.
At this point, Walter doesn't care about Hank at all. He is determined to toast with his son. Right after Walter Jr. finishes drinking, Walter goes to fill his son's glass again, but Hank directly blocks the glass with his hand. However, Walter doesn't give Hank any face. He continues pouring the drink over Hank's hand. Seeing Walter being unreasonable, Hank has no choice but to urge his nephew not to drink anymore. Then he turns and takes the bottle away. This directly infuriates Walter.
Sorry, buddy, no can do. It's my son, my bottle, my house. It's all right.
What are you waiting for? Bring it back.
Everyone's eyes are on Walter and Hank, and a confused Hank doesn't understand what got into Walter. Just as the two are about to come to blows, Walter Jr., after 3 glasses of alcohol, vomits directly into the swimming pool. Taking this opportunity, Hank quickly comes over to take care of Walter Jr. An awkward situation is thus dissolved. This gave Walter an unprecedented level of satisfaction, but at the same time, it came with a price. Because of this unpleasantness, Skyler started the Cold War mode that women are so good at. After sobering up, Walter called his wife and left a message, admitting his mistakes, but Skyler was not moved. She listened to Walter's message and decided to let him reflect on his actions. Just then, Ted, her boss at the company, came over to greet her, a part of his daily routine at work. Seeing Ted's meticulous care for her, Skyler found herself recalling the feelings of being in love. The next day, Skyler wore a mature and sexy outfit. Ted came over to say hello as usual. In order to catch Ted's eye, Skyler deliberately asked some questions that she already knew, and Ted solved them in a couple of sentences. Just when Ted was about to leave, Skyler purposely showed a very sad expression, and Ted couldn't help but step forward to comfort her, boldly placing his hand on hers. After thinking for a moment, Skyler withdrew her hand. as the gesture was too intimate. Just when the audience thought Skyler was refusing, she wiped her tears and then placed her hand back in Ted's. It looks like Walter's hat is ready to go, but he doesn't realize that his head is turning green because the home's water heater had been broken for a long time, and since he had nothing else to do these days, he personally went to the store and bought the most expensive water heater. With his strong DIY skills, Walter quickly installed the water heater. The foreshadowing of this water heater incident had been laid since the beginning of the series.
How about buy a new hot water heater? How's that idea? For the billionth time.
Just as Walter Jr. got home from school, he saw the long-awaited water heater and was thrilled. This time, Walter finally won Walter Jr.'s approval, and he took the opportunity to sincerely apologize for letting him drink. Walter Jr. didn't take the matter to heart and bore no blame towards his father. Just when he was about to finish up, he saw the floor had started to mold, so Walter bought new flooring from the market. It seems he was planning to renovate the house. However, Walter's diligent housework did not win Skyler's good attitude. This shows that when there is conflict between husband and wife, it is essential to communicate in time rather than blindly working hard in vain, or the consequences could be very serious. On the other hand, Jesse, who is in love with Jane, gets up early to prepare a breakfast for Jane, knowing that Jesse has always relied on eating odd hours to renew his life. This shows the tremendous change Jesse made for Jane, indicating how much he cares about her. To make up for standing Jane up last time, Jesse decided not to go anywhere today but to stay at home with her. They flipped through some of Jesse's old drawings, which featured characters with superpowers, his idols, but one of them is a retrograde man, who Jesse describes as having the power to run very fast when he is in danger. This also implies that Jesse's character is also like this. He always chooses to run away when he encounters difficulties. Just then, Jane heard someone knocking on her door. She went to see and found it was her father, Donald, coming to check on her. She quickly dressed and went back through the back door. Just as Donald was about to use his key to open the door, Jane opened it, seeing that it was his future father-in-law. Jesse dressed up and prepared to go out to greet him. This time, Jesse's clothes were different from his usual colorful attire, indicating he wanted to make a good impression on his future father-in-law, showing how much he cared about this relationship. However, Jane pretended not to know him, just brushed him off with a few words, and then led her father into the house. This left Jesse feeling very disappointed, and he could only smoke alone in the room to soothe his frustration. After her father left, Jane resumed her role as a girlfriend and came over to Jesse's place, where Jesse questioned why she wouldn't make their relationship public. Clearly, Jane wasn't prepared for this, as her father had always been strict with her and she didn't want to anger him. Jesse felt that Jane was just playing with him, and seeing her indifferent attitude, he chose to escape. This also confirmed the personality of the character in his drawings. The next day, Jesse woke up still unable to get over this issue. Just then, a piece of paper was slipped under the door. Jesse saw that it was a drawing by Jane of a girl apologizing. Seeing Jane taking the initiative to apologize, Jesse was as happy as a child. On the other side, Skyler, wearing less and less, waited for Ted's morning greeting, but this time Ted did not greet her as usual. Skyler had a flash of inspiration and deliberately knocked her pen holder onto the floor. And this trick indeed worked. Skyler's sexy outfit was not worn in vain. Meanwhile, Walter, like a fool, was still fixing the house, and after a busy day, he even went to the supermarket to shop at night. As he was heading to the checkout with 2 cans of paint, he happened to see a shopping cart filled with some very familiar items, the kind of stuff needed to produce contraband. Seeing this young man bring a bunch of useless items, Walter immediately got impatient and decided to give him a lesson.
You're buying the wrong matches.
What?
Those matches, they're the wrong kind. Red phosphorus is found in the striker strips, not the matches themselves. You need to get the big 200-count box of individual matchbooks.
Walter explained a few principles simply, leaving the other party speechless. Walter also reminded him not to buy everything from the same place. Hearing this, the young guy got scared and ran away. Seeing such unprofessional vendors, Walter shook his head in resignation. Because Walter had told Jesse he planned to quit producing contraband, he now felt that the contraband world should not be messed up by these amateurs, so he decided to assert his dominance here. Seeing 2 guys chattering there, Walter walked straight over, his presence instantly dominating. Facing the burly man across from him, Walter showed no fear.
Stay out of my territory.
With just one sentence, he He drove the two men away. Because of his unique talent in this area, Walter was not willing to just walk away. He felt that only here could he truly demonstrate his value.